Welcome back to the Union Street Podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Guy Aitchison in the building.
That's it. That's me. Hi there.
Hey, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I've been meaning to get you on here. We've been going back and forth, but I'm so glad we're finally able to get you on the podcast, Guy.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys are here. Bringing energy to Marion's downtown and the idea of there being kind of a independent art scene and, this sort of growing network of young energy and that kind of thing coming together, muraling the downtown, that sort of thing. We would never have thought that when we moved here in 1996. My wife and I, Michelle Wortman and I, we're artists from Chicago. Some people know us for our tattooing, and we still do that some. We paint and do other things as well, and we came here to sort of do that artist in the country thing, for lack of a better reason. And when we first came, Marion was about as mundane of a place as it could get. Very nice people. We were always, that was always the thing that saved the place. It's just everyone, but by and large, very nice population. But there just wasn't a spark happening. And we tried, you know what I mean? We used to invite other artists over to our home, and we would have figure drawing groups. We'd have a professional figure model come in, and we'd do these 4-hour sessions. And for a while, we had a decent thing going there. But it's hard to keep that rolling. And this was powered mostly by other tattoo artists who were also interested in, bettering their skills and trying to grow artistically. But people move, and it was just hard to keep it going.
And what time was this? When you guys first came down, and then?
Yeah, we moved here in 96, and shortly after that, we started networking with the local tattoo artists, and we got this drawing group together, and that lasted for a few years. So when we left Chicago, as you can imagine, it was a big change, socially and everything else, for better and for worse, both. And around this time was when my wife, Michelle, who was already an accomplished painter, started to learn tattooing. And we weren't in a place where there was a good shop to really have a traditional apprenticeship in. And so we just started hitting the tattoo convention circuit at the time. And that was sort of her street shop environment. It was also our social life for a long time there. And we did that for many years, 15 years or something like that. And this was like a convention a month or more, every few weeks, mostly that we could drive to. So we were driving around a lot. We somehow still liked each other despite that. And we had
miles on the road.
Yeah. And we had a good social life.
That's when
Yeah.
I mean, lifetime in a car.
Didn't run out of things to talk about, Yeah. And we were both trying to grow in the same ways, as artists and as professionals, and grappling with the great puzzle of tattooing, which is it's a very multifaceted puzzle, and one that I've been working at for over 35 years and still picking away at it, trying to understand it. So that kept us busy for a long time. But more recently, as you know, things are actually starting to happen here. And that's exciting, and so we're starting to participate in local art events here now, in the Southern Illinois area at Cedarhurst Arts. Michelle actually has entered to be in a couple local art shows. She and I and our daughter Kaya have an art show coming up at the Long Branch Cafe on March 4th. Mostly little paintings, it's called. Which
that's awesome.
We can go into more detail later, but yeah, we're starting to really work the local art scene, and because now it feels like there's a place for that, and it was very hard to find that place up until recently, and so we just kind of had our studio out in the woods. We had a lot of visitors, a lot of collaborative projects, a lot of very high energy work going on there in the middle of nowhere, but it was not happening locally. You know what I mean? It was kind of happening in its own space.
Sure.
In hyperspace,
Hyperspace Studio.
Yes, that's the name of the place.
That's super cool. And I do want to, for anybody that doesn't know or familiar with your work and your body of work, and that what you've done in the tattoo world for, gosh, you said 35 years. I do want to add a little context of how you got into it, sort of some of that journey and some of the context around your style, the biomechanical. I mean, there's a vast body of work, and we can touch on however much or as little as you want on that. But for someone that might not be more familiar, someone listening about the tattoo.
Okay, well, yeah. So you can see my work at hyperspacestudios.com, guyaitchison.com, Aitchison, or on my Instagram, Guy Aitchison Art, no underscores or anything like that. And you'll see there's a big mix of stuff. Like recently I've been doing some very classic kind of stuff, sitting outside and painting the snowy landscape. I'm just trying to learn from the old masters this way. But if you go way back, when I first started tattooing, I was infatuated with the biomechanical work of H.R. Giger. I also was influenced by a surrealist, a German surrealist named Max Ernst, who had done this fabulous, beautifully rendered organic work back in the 40s and 50s, and it was just incredible stuff. Seeing it when I was 11 years old was just a mind-opening experience. So it was kind of bringing those two influences into tattooing. And so why tattooing? I had started out wanting to be a book cover illustrator. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to grow up to be like the guy that did the covers for the Isaac Asimov books. That's what I wanted to do, right? And somewhere along the ways, I ended up doing album covers instead, as a teenager. So that was sort of what I cut my teeth on. That was my first kind of professional artist experience. I did about 40 of them. And some of them are terrible. A few of them are okay. You can see the early emergence of my style. You can see some of that organic, Giger-ish kind of stuff. Some is just straight rip-off Giger, the poor man's Giger. But, I was 18. You got to give me a little room there.
Right. That's the start. I mean, that's, we're influenced, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We do.
Yep. Yeah, it was in that sort of 1980s heavy metal airbrush style.
Nice.
Right. I did some punk rock and metal kind of stuff. Nothing very large, in terms of anything anybody might have seen. Back in the 80s, people might I know somebody that actually collected a bunch of them. Had somebody approach me once and wanted me to sign them. He had the band sign all these covers, and he just needed me to sign them, and his collection was complete. It's pretty wild.
That's cool.
But that was my first professional artist experience, and I was finding out quickly that it was not a good paying gig, although it was enjoyable. I really liked the work itself. And somewhere in there, my sister, Hannah Aitchison, who she was one of those TV tattoo people, but this was long before that, said, "Hey, let's go get tattooed." And, we were punk rock teenagers, and I'd never thought about tattoos before that. I'd seen tattoos on people, a few of them. They weren't very popular back then in the Chicago suburbs, and the ones I'd seen were pretty much just garbage. So I'd never thought, "Ooh, I want one of those,"
Sure.
But she mentioned it, and in that punk rock context or whatever, suddenly it was the best idea I'd ever heard. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so we called and we made an appointment. And, I figured I look old enough, that they probably won't card me. There's this disreputable kind of biker place in nearby Aurora, Illinois, in the basement of this downtown building that we were going to go to. And we figured, just bring some beer and they won't care. So we made an appointment for a week later. And during that week, I had dreams about tattoos. And I'd never even seen a tattoo machine. I knew nothing about it. But my mind filled in the blanks, and I had dreams of not just getting tattooed, but of doing tattoos and of teaching tattooing and of like standing on a stage addressing a tattooed crowd. And it was like the closest thing I've ever had to a calling,
Sounds like a vision that came to you.
What it was a wish list. Just all of a sudden I could see, I could jump on this tattoo thing, and I could go as far as it's capable of taking me. Because something occurred to me really quickly once I did a little research, and there was no internet back then, of course. But in the entire Midwest, as far as I could tell, there's nobody doing tattoos that knew how to draw a stick figure. You know, you had to go to California if you wanted a tattoo done by an actual artist, and there were about 3 of them. You know what I mean? Or Hawaii. You know, I mean, you really had to travel.
Right.
There was Cliff Raven, who was still on and off in Chicago sometimes. If you could line up with him, he was an actual master, but that was it. And I kind of realized that it was ripe for the picking. It was, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but so the idea became irresistible to me. But I couldn't get an apprenticeship at that shop. I was too young. Mm-hmm. They were like, "Get lost, kid. You know, we'll take your money if you want to get tattooed." But
that's about it. We're not gonna, teach you, let you do that apprenticeship, because that's a whole other.
Well, but then you're releasing a competitor into the world, you know.
Yeah.
And back then it was a small field. There wasn't room for a lot, you know. And
sure,
Chicago even had a moratorium on new shops.
Really.
A shop had to close for them to release a new license to a new shop, and there were like 7. Now there's like 7 in one street. You know what I mean? So it was.
And the reasoning for them doing that, I mean, would it just? Why would they do that?
Up until recently, in Illinois, you had to be 21 to get tattooed. It was the only place on earth like that. I didn't know that. And okay, so what happened was back in the 60s, there was a place called South State Street in Chicago, and it was this bustling, kind of seedy place where you had your penny arcades and your, you know, gambling dens and your, you know, drinking houses and your hookers and all that stuff, and lots of sailors walking around. And you had your tattoo parlors. They were kind of like the big draw, especially if you were one of these sailors. Green at the gills, you know, first time away from mom and dad, you know, sure. and the military authority, and you're walking around in uniform with money in your pocket.
Yeah.
Stewed, blued, and tattooed.
Yeah.
So
a lot of that, huh?
Yes.
Yeah,
So the city fathers in Chicago hated South State Street. They just thought it was a cancerous wart on their fine city, and they looked at different ways of shutting it down, and they came up with like the silver bullet. They raised the age of tattooing in Illinois to 21. That's all it took.
Wow.
That is all it took, because all those shops were relying on this sailor income. So
18,
they left. They
19,
left the state. Like 99% of them left the state.
Wow.
And sailors stopped coming to South State Street because they couldn't get tattooed there. There were places they could, just on the other side of the border. In Indiana, they could just go to Gary and get tattooed there.
Yeah.
Or you know, up in Wisconsin. You know, there were no shortage, but you just couldn't do it in Chicago. And so South State Street is still to this day desolate.
Wow.
Task failed successfully.
They just, I mean, squashed. It sounds like they intentionally drove that.
They're very unfriendly. Very unfriendly to the idea. And so then there was around that same time, there was a outbreak of hepatitis in New York, and there were some deaths, and it was traced to a tattoo studio. And I use the word studio very lightly there. Imagine, you know, something that looks a lot more like a dumpster. So the problem wasn't tattooing. The problem was lack of regulation and oversight.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And they just didn't want to take responsibility because, you know, by and large, government people would rather not have to regulate something. They'd rather it would just go away. Right. So anyway, that's what happened in Illinois. Finally, it got returned to 18 like the rest of the world. But you know, if you can go to war, you should be able to get a tattoo, I think.
I think so, too.
However, I'd rather personally tattoo people who are a little more mature. Yeah. I cover up a lot of those old tattoos that people get in their teens, Mm-hmm.
I think just south of here in Kentucky, it's 16, I believe.
Yeah, and a lot of places just don't care, especially if a parent comes in and signs something. But, you know,
right.
it's not my goal to just tattoo as much as possible. You know,
So let's take us through that. So from that time, you said there was a void. It sounded like within the industry that you saw opportunity in,
Right.
and that you wanted to create your own path in. Can you talk more about that? Where did you seek out after? You mentioned maybe the stick and poke or the stick figure.
Okay,
Can you
so
mention that transition journey?
I couldn't get an apprenticeship at first, and so I continued doing the album covers, and I continued just kind of hanging around the Chicago punk rock scene, and you know, doing band flyers and painting people's leather jackets, and just eking out a living that way. And at this particular time, I was living in the back of a print shop. The owner of the shop was letting me stay there, and at night when it was closed, I could use the Xerox machine, all this other stuff. So to me, it was a bonanza, even though I was sleeping on a roll-up futon underneath the table. I was better off than a lot of my friends at the time. And I finished an album cover, and I sent it off, and I got paid the most I'd ever been paid for an album cover, which was $500. Or it might have been $750. It was like, to me, an incredible amount of money, because up until then I was getting paid like $250 for like a week's work, chump change.
Yeah.
I was really being taken advantage of, Even at the time, the standard was much higher than that, but the people I was working for, they all knew each other,
Yeah.
So I had this wad of money, and I could either have gotten myself an apartment or a tattoo. And so I went to the only place in town that my friends in the punk scene seemed to all regard, positively, Bob Oslin's Custom Tattooing. And he was just in this place by himself. It was just this one guy. And I got tattooed by him, and I brought some drawings. And by the end of the session, he'd offered me an apprenticeship based on my drawings. And I guess he thought I was okay. And so I started my apprenticeship with Bob Oslin, and I show up for my first day, and he takes me aside, and he tells me, "I need to tell you something about myself." I had just moved from the suburbs into Chicago. I'd been living there for a couple of years, in various different couches and whatever. But I hadn't been exposed to very much yet. And he tells me, "Yeah, I'm a recovering addict." Okay. Like, you mean like you used to be an addict? It's like, it's more complicated than that. This was my first real encounter with addiction. And he was sincerely wanting to better his life, but it was a hard thing. It never stopped being a hard thing in the 2 years that I was there at the shop, and it killed him not long after I left. Wow. And of course, through him and just through being in the scene, I encountered a lot more of the same. I worked on some people in the rock scene as well, and where that stuff's cool. Go hang out at the recording studio, and you got these guys walking around with syringes in their hat bands, but they're on a major label, so it's cool. And so it was a pretty crazy scene to suddenly be immersed in. And he had good days and bad days, and he really was a good human being. And he never wanted to take advantage of me. I know that. And when he did, it was in a junky kind of way. Like, I overcharge you for needles by $60 so I could go buy a couple bags of heroin. But I know you can afford it in the long run because you're making all this money, and I'm struggling, and I'm, barely hanging on to my apartment. That kind of thing. So, but he had some good stuff to teach me, and he took me around to conventions, and I got to meet some of the most important tattooers at the time because of him. He knew some of these people, Don Ed Hardy, you might have heard that name, Jack Rudy, Kerry Barba, who was one of my biggest influences at the time and did one of my first big name tattoos in my own collection. And through his introduction to the industry, and through him introducing me the right way to these luminaries, I managed to get a foot in the door and managed to make a positive impression and not fuck it up. I guess I don't want to say the rest is history, but that was my launch. So I was able to stay at his shop for 2 years, and then from there, shared a studio with this guy, the Reverend Mad Jack. He was a prison biker guy who I met through Bob. They'd known each other as kids, grew up together, and he was all right. Mad Jack, he was prison paranoid, which made it hard sometimes. But again, he was a good human being. It's just he had his baggage, and he was an older guy with it was rough around the edges, and inevitably we couldn't stay partners. But that was 2 good years. So that was 4 years total of me being with these, working with these
Still
guys.
in Chicago, still
in Chicago, yeah. Then I opened my own place, Guilty and Innocent Productions, and that was for 4-ish years before Michelle and I finally came down here. And that was it was an interesting time. I was working 12 and 16-hour days. Michelle and I had a loft on the same block as the studio, and sometimes I'd take off a couple of weeks at a time and just paint. She was a short bike ride to where she worked, and so we lived in this bubble where we were just hardcore making art. And we'd climb up on the roof as the sun was going down and eat food that we bought at the little Mexican place across the street, watch the sun go down, and then paint till 4 a.m. or whatever. And it was good times. We were young. And sometime during that period, I don't want to say I had an awakening, but I felt like I was getting caught up in this shopkeeper drama kind of thing, having employees, having to hire and fire, having to deal with all this he said, she said kind of BS going on in the shop, having to carry the shop financially when the people there were not delivering, having to deal with getting stolen from. There just came a point where I asked myself, is this really what I want? And I was reading this book, The Center of the Cyclone, by John Lilly. He was the guy that movie Altered States was based on. And he had been involved in this big research effort involving dolphins. I guess he was at the head of this thing, and he had all these people that he was working with. And he had kind of run aground with that. Like it just become work. And what he really was interested in at the time was exploring the mind. And so he ended up, breaking apart this whole thing, disassembling this entire big operation because it just didn't fit him anymore. And I thought, I can do that too. And so that's how we ended up down here. And why down here? It's sort of random. It's not much more than a dart in the map sort of thing. We wanted to be driving distance from Chicago. We didn't want to be in the flatlands. I'd been down in the area a couple times before I was a tattoo artist. I was, in the punk rock scene and, down here with friends, just partying. And these guys knew the place well enough to, take me out to Natural Bridge and places like that. It's like, and this is kind of awesome here, and it sort of stuck. And then I remembered this vision I'd had as a kid, that I was going to be this artist in the country, and I was going to have a boat and a little body of water and solar panels and all this stuff. And I don't have the solar panels yet, but yeah, that was a vision that was always kind of there. And when that need to leave Chicago came, it just sort of like resurfaced, that old vision resurfaced. And now, as to why Michelle was ready to go along with it, I don't know. She says to this day that she just had no idea what she was getting herself into. Such a gigantic change of leaving the social scene that we had going in Chicago and starting from scratch, basically homesteading, having this art homestead. But we did it. We just did it. It was one of those things where we knew what an extreme move it was, and after we had actually, you know, found the place and were about to sign the mortgage, I had this moment of panic, almost didn't do it. But the idea of staying and continuing the way things had been, I couldn't stomach it, And again, she was fine with whatever at the time, I think she just went along with it because we were having such a good time together as artists, and she just wanted to trust that it would be fine. I don't think that the real enormity of the change settled in at first, but once it did, it ended up changing us as people, causing us to, I guess, respond to our environment a lot differently, rather than responding as social creatures. We're responding more as artistic filters, really, she and I can be sitting waiting for carry-out food in a lobby, and there's light angling in through the window, and we can spend 10 minutes talking about shadow patterns on the wall, and we're both equally interested. So I think that being in this sort of self-imposed creative isolation has definitely caused our perception to home in on this aesthetic aspect of life that I think a lot of people are in too much of a hurry to really notice.
And that's how we actually, I think, met, was for the first time at Cedarhurst. I believe it was a show that Michelle had paintings, and you were presenting the art of tattooing there. Is that right?
Right, yeah. So we've done a couple things at Cedarhurst. So the Cedarhurst Center for the Arts in Mount Vernon, a really cool place. Like, we couldn't believe it when we first saw it.
Kind of looks like the Lincoln Center.
Yeah,
it has
definitely
those arches. It's beautiful.
It's like something you'd see in a big city art museum, scaled down just a little bit. Nice sculpture garden, all this stuff. And we have a friend up there who's a school teacher, an art teacher, who Michelle tattoos, and this is how we ended up meeting the people at Cedarhurst, Carrie, who runs the Schroed Art Center, and the rest of the crew there. And so then Michelle had a solo show at the Schroed Center, and when that was taken down, and before, I forget the order of events because she's shown a couple of things there, but I ended up doing this talk on the art of tattooing and hanging a couple of paintings up. So that was fun. Yeah, I haven't actually posted the edit of that yet. I should.
Nice.
It was just a little historical talk. Yeah, I used to do a lot more of this public speaking thing. I've kind of stepped back from that a little bit right now. I'm really focused on, we're at a really important stage of parenthood right now. Our daughter is a very creative individual, and she's writing a lot and painting a lot and that kind of thing. And I don't want to just be busy running around doing my own thing. There's time for that. There was time for that before. There will be time for that later. So I've slowed down a little bit on chasing the me stuff, and I've been doing family stuff as much as I can. And when I say doing family stuff, this includes, actively collaborating with the daughter. We're having a great time. She and I have been working on an illustrated children's book for a few years, which we're almost finished with. And then, the three of us, Michelle and Kaya and I, are going to be having this show on the 4th at the Long Branch Cafe. And we've known Elaine from the Long Branch since we moved here. She's always been amazing. And it was interesting because Kaya has been doing this painting challenge with Michelle and I twice a year. It's a paint every day challenge, the Strata Easel challenge, which it's pretty strenuous to actually paint every day a meaningful amount of painting. And it has to be from life. So you're not using a photo, or you're not just painting from your imagination. You're painting something that's in front of you, whether it be an object or a person or a landscape. And I've come to love doing that. It is the closest thing that I have to meditating. because there's a type of being present that I don't normally take the time and energy to do, where I'm really looking, and I'm looking at colors, and I'm looking at distances, and I'm looking at the way objects are sitting next to each other. I'm just looking at the world, and I'm breathing it in. But especially the colors. That is the thing I've always struggled with. I'm colorblind. Not that I live in a black and white world, but I have a different gamut from most people. And so I've got this additional kind of insecurity about color use when I especially when I tattoo. I know I see red darker than other people see it, that kind of thing. So I tiptoe around color a little bit. And so painting from life has allowed me to just dive into color. And since it's not a tattoo, I can fail all I want, but the other thing that's sort of weird is that if it looks good to me, I still have to show it to other people and say, how does this measure up to real life, and get honest feedback on it. And that's a hard one. I follow a lot of painters who do really great, plein air landscapes, and their color work has something to it that I just don't grasp. It's hard, because I don't have the tools for it. But I feel like it should be doable, the same way that Helen Keller learned to speak,
Sure.
I'm functionally blind in one eye, so I don't have depth perception either. So why am I a visual artist with all these problems with my eyes? I don't know, but I think of it as being an asset, not a liability, because I see differently from others. And because I see differently, I could show you something that maybe you wouldn't think to see otherwise. So hopefully that makes my art more interesting.
I think it does. I think that's a fascinating detail about how you see the world, and how you're, like you mentioned, being a lens, interpreting, your own perception. I mean, that's is very unique.
An artist is kind of that. I mean, any medium that you work in, you are a filter. You're filtering your experience, and you are making something from that, and you are sharing that thing. And I would hope that the thing that you show me is not the thing that I would come up with, because I can already do that without you, so you can show me something that I wouldn't have thought of. And so that's what makes you interesting, right? One of the things I like about tattooing, that I've always enjoyed about it, is the social aspect of it, especially when you're a custom artist that's doing large work. What that means is you're going to sit with one person, and maybe their partner or buddy, for the entire day, or maybe 2 or even 3 days in a row. And then you're going to see them again a couple months later and do the same thing. And so you get past the small talk pretty quick. And you can find out what are the most interesting things that each other think about. And I'm not a person that likes crowds, but I really enjoy people on an individual basis like that, because again, it's not like I don't like me, but I already know me. I want to see a different perspective, and I don't want to just hear my opinion coming out of somebody else's mouth. I want to hear a different angle, and especially as an artist, I want to be blown away. I want to look at a piece of art that from somebody whose name I've never heard of before and say, holy crap, I never would have thought of that. That to me is a joy.
Yeah, that is. And as a theme of your own story is having visions, and maybe you could speak more about the visionary arts and how that relates to.
Well, okay, visionary art. The term has kind of drifted around a little bit. For a while, it was applied to so-called outsider art. which in some cases is sort of crude, bad perspective, that kind of thing. The idea being that they are untrained, and so it's coming from some pure place. But more recently, it's become more associated with kind of the psychedelic art movement, or people who kind of have broken free from society's chains and have this greater vision of what their existence in the universe is about, right? And they paint paintings about spiritual freedom. And one person who's well known for this is Alex Gray, the guy who's done the Tool album covers recently. A lot of people, when they think of visionary art, they think of Alex. His wife Allison, they have a place out in upstate New York where it's sort of a visionary art institute almost. But there's quite a scene, especially in Denver. Denver is a big center of the arts. You have people like Amanda Sage and David Heskin, Aloria Weaver, countless really amazing tattoo artists out there. But again, there's this psychedelic connection. A lot of them, they go to the festivals. They're happening out in the woods where you've got the psychedelic electronic music going. You'll have a lot of live painting happening, where artists are often collaborating, inviting the audience to give feedback. And so there's a almost tribal element to it, letting down of the boundaries. And, of course, with some people, we're talking about using entheogens along with this, with others, it's just the scene itself and the vibe and the generally free sense of letting you be you and letting your creativity free, kind of can have a psychedelic effect as well, and so
liberating feeling.
Right. So a lot of that has kind of culminated into what we know of as the visionary art movement. And I'm kind of at the periphery of that, I haven't really been to these festivals, really. I mean, Michelle and I have done live painting a few times at a few things like that, along with the Grays and some other artists. But, as parents, we haven't really been screwing around with festivals, it's just not time for that right now.
Yeah, right.
And so, we just paint what we paint, but there definitely is an overlap in our Venn diagram with the visionary art scene,
Sure.
Absolutely. Those kinds of explorations of the mind, that's something that's always been interesting to me. And,
Sure.
and I love the idea of an expansive spiritual model, all-inclusive, that permits you to be the best you can be, and energizes and inspires and empowers you, and that allows a community to form where everyone can be unique and still accepting and mutually supportive, and so at its best, that's what the visionary art scene is. At its worst, there's a lot of fashion and that kind of BS, but it's humans.
Yeah. Sure.
It's monkeys doing monkey stuff,
Exactly.
but there's some cool art that's coming out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool experiences too. I do want to sort of paint the picture, if you will, of bringing it back to you guys coming here, to having your clients here. Can you describe that process of, again, I know you're doing more of the painting dailies now, which are cool too. And that's this new show coming up at Long Branch.
Right.
But can you describe that a little bit?
Okay. So yeah, I don't have a lot of clients at any given time. I'm not doing a lot of tattoos. I'm doing a fair amount of tattooing. And I always prioritize the people that I'm already working on. So
Your existing clients that you have a relationship you've mentioned.
Right.
The intimacy that is built over time, sessions, I'm
Plus,
sure.
I'm not going to bump them to let somebody new in. You know what I mean? When they've
Sure.
supported me financially for the last who knows how many years, right? So they get my priority.
Yeah.
And so a few new people, sneak in every year. There's a few new ones. Sometimes I'll just post, hey, I got room for some new people,
Yeah.
And from that, I'll get a couple of random folk. And But it's a process. There's a filtering process. I mean, there's an email address where you can send a request, but honestly, I skim through those pretty fast, and it's more of a, like, if I put them in order and address them, from first to last, the rate they're coming in at versus the rate that I'd be addressing them, it just wouldn't make sense. So I'm really bad that way. But
And where are these people coming from? Are they, because they're coming to your studio, right? Can you maybe talk about that process?
Yeah, it's all over the place. I mean, your serious tattoo collectors, they know that they're going to be traveling. They're going to be flying. They're going to be getting a hotel room or an Airbnb or something. It's a very specialty thing that both Michelle and I offer. We're niche tattoo artists, right? I'm doing this free-form, bio-organic, mechanical kind of stuff. She's doing a kind of balanced overall floral look, although she's been branching out into doing small individual kind of illustrative nature kind of pieces, which have been really neat. But there's a lot of artists in the industry that have a specialty thing, like somebody that does gigantic 3D script, or whatever. And people will, say, yeah, one day I want to get a piece from them, and it'll end up on their wish list. And so, I get these serious collectors that come through. And then some of them are people from the old Chicago days that I'm still tattooing. Some of them are the adult children of the people from the Chicago days who I'm still tattooing. They also get priority. And they know, whether it's Michelle or I they're coming to, they know exactly what they're looking for, and when they contact us for the work, we will kind of go over the, what is it that you're hoping for? Okay, you want a sleeve, all right. So, here's the hourly rate, roughly how many visits to expect, et cetera, so you can budget it. But let's talk. Like, there's a whole range of stuff that I do. Either, if you can't describe it verbally, maybe send me a few photos of pieces I've done, or even pieces that friends of mine have done. Other people in the bio scene. Our work is all very mutually compatible. And that'll give me an idea. And sometimes I'll ask for them to send me a photo of them, of their body part. If they want an arm, I'll have them stand and face the camera, and then sideways, and then back view, because I'll design on those photos, because everyone's got a different shape, and that'll actually help spark the creative process, because I want what I do to flow and fit them as perfectly as it can. I don't want to just start on a blank screen. That's, a lot of artists have an issue with that. That blank canvas, but it's never blank when you're tattooing. You've got this flowing form to work with. You start with that. You say, okay, I'm going to begin by, here's some high areas, and here's a low area. Here's a crease. Okay, so I've got those things to start with, and I'm going to structure around that. So it's never blank. You've always got something to work with. And so, generally they'll be booked, 6-8 months out or whatever. And of course, once somebody's in regularly, they don't have to wait that long between appointments, because I like to get to people every couple 3 months if they're getting a sleeve or a back done, if they can afford it. And then we just they'll sit as long as they can per visit. Usually it'll be 2 days, sometimes 3 days, if it's somebody visiting for a sleeve or a back, because one day is just, if you're traveling, it's barely worth it. I don't want to say it's not worth it, because if that's all you can afford, that's all you can afford. But usually people save up, and we'll do 2 days. We'll do 2 separate areas, so we're not working the same area. Often they'll say that day 2 is easier than day 1, because they already know what to expect. They're already in the zone. And so we have a very efficient, they'll come and they'll get 12 hours of tattooing done in one visit.
Wow.
And we can get a lot done. And, so a back piece, it would maybe be 3 such visits, 4 if they're huge. Sleeve, about the same, And often in the course of working on a project like this, they're talking about the next plan that they have. And so, I'm not trying to be a huckster or a salesman, but naturally I'll engage them in that conversation. And sometimes based on what I've already started doing on them and their response to their favorite parts of it, their favorite aspects of it, when they start mentioning ideas for the other things, I might get a clear picture right away because now I'm working with them. And I'll talk to them about this picture I've got in my head, and they might get really excited, right? And so next thing you know, we're finishing up a piece and we're planning the next one. And so that's how it goes. With the abstract work, it all flows together. So, somebody could start with something small, and as long as they are consistent in their kind of plan that they're following with it, the flow of it or whatever, they can make it all work. If it's one artist, they can make it seamless. One thing about biomet collectors, though, is they often will like to collect from a lot of different artists. I've never done a full body suit. I've participated in many. And I get that, there's a lot of flavors of bio. I mean, why just get vanilla, And so I'm happy to participate, if somebody shows up and they've got, an upper thigh done by Ty McEwen and Nick Baxter and, a foot done by another artist, and they've got, some space on their calf. And I'm going to see how the top piece kind of ends and fades off. I'm going to see how the other pieces look, what their lighting is, what their color is. And I'm going to try to think about that entire leg when I design for it. And any other artist in the bio genre is going to do the same, because they personally know most of those other artists, or at least they're all commenting on each other's stuff all the time. It's a smallish scene, and nobody wants to drop the ball. If a serious collector shows up with some nice bio, they want to make sure that they do something that complements it perfectly, and so it's fun that way. It's a fun genre of work to be doing, just based on how flexible and mutually compatible it is. There's so many different flavors of it, but they all work because there's kind of a list of principles behind it, having to do with flow, contrast, color use, the way that it sits on the body, the way that it sort of warps and changes the body, the way that we achieve depth and illusions of dimension. Those are common understandings among almost all the bio artists. And so then you get all the differences between us. Just make it more interesting when you put them side by side like that.
And it sounds pretty cohesive, but also collaborative when you're working with a client that has all the full body by many other artists. I mean, the canvas is collaborating with the artists.
Yep.
Your work is going next to someone's. So how does that all flow? How do you make that? I mean, you mentioned some of the colors,
so the way usually when an artist is putting a piece on that's not wrapping all the way around, it's ending someplace, they're not just going to end it like with scissors, you know what I mean? It's going to kind of break off a little bit. And so when the person is sending me their photos, like I'm going to want a photo of that leg, like I was saying earlier. Yeah. Now, in that case, it's not just to get a picture of their shape, but also I want to see the existing tattoo work. And so I can see, okay, that thing that Dan did flows in this direction. And this thing up here that Kaya Heitland did, it comes around that direction. So I could do something that joins that with that, and it'll follow in the same direction. So that's going to be one of my sort of roots to this composition, is I'm going to have this thing that's going to join that with that. So I'll have a few things that I might pick up from the surrounding work that sort of form a foundation before I've even started thinking much about it. It's like, okay, I'm going to draw something that's got this flow and this flow in it. This arc and this diagonal line here, and everything else is going to be hung from that.
So when you're designing for the picture, you've got that. Is it drawing? Or do you go straight to skin? What is the process of taking that and then you've got your foundation. How do you get that on the skin?
Okay, so typically what I'll do is I'll do a bunch of sketches, a minimum of 3 different ones. I might do up to a dozen. And it depends on what I'm feeling. I might go old style and print up a bunch of little prints of the person's leg and just stick those in my sketchbook. And, you know, I'm sitting around drinking coffee. In the morning, I might just bust through a half dozen different ones. I might use ballpoint pens so I'm not erasing and screwing around, right? If there's something I like about one but don't like about it, I'll just start another one next to it. I try to be very quick and disposable with those. I try not to get attached or hung up. The whole idea is to loosen up. You can make some garbage there. It's okay. Or I'll do them in Procreate on my iPad. You know, same thing where I'll do them quickly. I'll just, you know, do a sketch, turn off the layer, create a new layer, do another one, and then I'll kind of go through all of them. And sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes I can narrow it down to my 4 favorites. And in that case, I will show them to the client. A lot of artists hate doing this. They're like, I don't want to let them, you know, make a bad decision.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you know, if you don't know, if you don't have a preference, then let them decide. They'll love having that kind of input, right?
Yeah. That goes back to that collaboration with your canvas.
If you really have a preference, you shouldn't have to ask. You know, it's that thing where, you know, when you flip a coin, often it's like while that coin is in the air, you realize where you want it to land. You know, at that point, it doesn't matter where it lands. Catch that thing, put it back in your pocket. You've already figured it out. You know, if there's an outcome you want, you shouldn't have to ask your client, right? But if I'm really not sure, and sometimes I'm just not, you know, I've got several that are very different from each other that each of them could potentially be equally cool. So that's when I'll show it to the client. And they might have a strong preference. So I'm glad I asked, right? And so then from there, I might refine that drawing a little bit more if I've got it narrowed down to 1. Sometimes it's morning of. The client shows up and I've got 11 sketches and I've just printed them all. Maybe I did it in Procreate, but I've printed them out on paper because we want to be able to look at them as much as we need. And I might say, so you got a favorite here? And they might say, you got a favorite? I don't know. I might say, well, I like the top of that one. This little part over here on this one, this has got some cool flow, but this part here looks kind of like a turd. And this circular thing over here on this one. Those are the parts that I'm into. And they might say, yeah, okay, cool, let's just combine those. Or they might point out a few other things, right? So, you know, it's very much a piecemeal process at that point. I'm just trying to open up and start flowing and allow things to happen. If I try to control it too much, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something I've already done. That's what happens when you exert too much control, right? You are going to conform it to the norm, and the norm is going to be your habit, and your habit is, if you're an artist, going to be your rut, right? And sometimes a rut can be lucrative. Sometimes you'll have no limit of clients that are ready to line up and get that same darn thing that you've been doing every day for the last 15 years over and over again, and you will continue to put food on your table, and you'll be able to tell yourself, I guess I'm stuck doing this. Because if I did something else, maybe I wouldn't have as many appointments. So yeah, you got to be careful of that. So I'm happy to let the client have some input. I'm happy to take some curveballs. If I have a sketch I'm happy with, and the client says, yeah, I love it, but I was really hoping that such and such. And there's a part of me that's like, oh. And there's another part of me that's, hey, stop it. I've trained myself to try to really listen to the client without getting annoyed. I know a lot of tattooers who have a bad habit of getting annoyed. Remember, they're paying you. They're making your whole fabulous tattoo career possible.
Yeah.
Some of them might be annoying, but mostly they just want to get a nice tattoo. And they might have something to tell you that could change your career if you would only listen. They might say, hey, you know, this thing that you do and this other thing that you do, how come we've never done those like together in one piece? And you might say to yourself, I have no idea. Let's do it. You know,
It's a great
I can't
idea.
tell you how many times this happened to me.
Wow.
You know, we don't know ourselves as well as we think we do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and especially when you're working with the same clients for a long time, they're going to start to identify your strengths in ways that you might not even see, and so that's where those productive curveballs come from. And sometimes they're last minute, and sometimes you want to get annoyed, but you give it a chance. You just say, you know what, I'm going to actually try that. I'm going to take this sketch that I've become attached to, I'm going to set it aside, I'm going to try drawing that, and we'll just see. And you might even tell yourself, yeah, I'm just going to whip through this drawing real quick so they can see how my original idea is the better one. But by the time you get halfway through it, you might be like, yeah, I kind of like this.
I think they were right.
Yeah.
They might have been onto something.
So, yeah.
Well, it's having that humility, right, and humbleness to not say my artist ego is going to be the only correct answer. I think that's a dangerous path too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Again, you can get into that rut. And the whole time thinking you're king of the world, you know. So, okay, I've been doing this a long time and been a teacher for a long time. And I see people responding to some of the stuff I post occasionally with the word master, right? And of course, there's a part of me that's like, yeah. But it's funny because there's this thing now to people who are just starting out in your creative path. You're looking uphill and you're like, oh my God, I don't know shit, right?
Yeah.
And you start to fight your way up that hill. And so you're going to go through a few stages of, like, there was a point where I had kind of gotten the basics of tattooing under control. And because I could draw better than other tattoo artists at the time, I thought I was the shit, you know? I even had groupies, you know what I mean? The early 20s, you know, you can really convince yourself because you still haven't finished growing your brain yet, right? And then if you're lucky, something will knock you loose from that. Maybe you've got friends that talk sense into you. And you start to re-examine, and you might realize you have room to improve, and then before you know it, you're like, oh my God, I don't know shit. And there you are again. And you might even have an existential crisis about it. And then you'll fight your way back up. And you might have a few cycles of this. And if there's anything to this idea of mastery, I think, because I feel like I'm mostly in this place now, that you get to a place where you know that you don't know shit, but that's a beautiful thing. It's an invitation to explore with joy and wonder, and yet you have enough competence from experience that you're not going to fuck it up. So I'm happy to not know shit. I'm happy to be back in that place. It's a great opportunity, and you know, so as a teacher for all these years, I used to try to remind my students of that, you know, that I'm just a fellow explorer here, you know, and so I was doing these weekly Monday night sessions for a long time on Zoom with a group of students, and you know, I've been teaching under the Reinventing the Tattoo title for over 25 years. And in that time, I've gone through many stages of that, oh man, I don't know shit, versus, oh yeah, I'm getting this under control. And it's been a really interesting journey because I have this online program where I have to be able to take whatever my current understanding of the art form is and put it in words and make either a video or a written chapter or something where I can make a reasonably true statement about contrast or whatever, and have it be something that is useful to people that they can then say, I can apply that tonight. When I do that evening session tonight, I'm going to try that out, and that it could actually make a difference for them. So that's what the teaching thing has provided me with, is an opportunity to experiment with trying to articulate these understandings in a way that works, and in doing so, finding out where all the holes in my own understanding are, and in the course of designing the different exercises and things, to try to then apply those ideas to my own work. And so there's a few really like very strong pieces in my portfolio where when I'm teaching a seminar and I show them, I say, this is an example of a tattoo where I've actually followed my own advice, you know, because you can only do that part of the time, and you can only do that partially, you know, because that's just life. But every now and then you're able to, you know, things align in such a way that you're able to combine all of your strengths and understandings in a way that is exceptionally strong. And, you know, that kind of sets your high water mark. And, you know, you can't always accomplish that, but from that point on, you kick yourself every time you don't.
Yeah, you set the bar too high. Yeah. You said, "How did I do that?" Well, now you got.
I followed my own advice. Okay, I must know what I'm doing. How come I can't do that every time? Back to that being human thing.
Yeah. Well, you learn a lot from those highs, but honestly, more from the failing. I think almost.
Yeah. I mean, any successful person will tell you, you know, that it's all the rejections, all the failures, all the, you know, brushing the dust off and picking yourself back up and saying, okay, I'll try with 3 drops instead of 2, you know, or whatever, until you get it. And
that is the joy of creativity, right? That is a joy.
And it's the torture of it too, you know, because sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you will orbit around a gap, you know. It's like, how come I can't improve this? Every time I try to do this, it just looks terrible. And I've tried a bunch of different ways of improving it, and it's not improving it. Why isn't it improving? What is it I don't get? And I see other people that do get it, you know, and so you can get caught up in those kinds of thought processes. The maze, you can get caught up in the maze, and you can lose power in the process. You can talk yourself down from being strongly creative and feeling empowered. You can talk yourself into being mired in doubt and letting your inner critic tear you down, and that's a hard one. You know, you look at social media and you see all this success, you know, because that's all that people want to show there. They don't show the failures. And so you look at your own life and you say, well, how come they're having such an easier time with it than me? I must not be a very high quality person. That must be it, you know. Maybe I just don't know how to learn. Maybe I don't have anything to offer. Maybe I missed the boat, you know, and just this whole thing is not set up for me. Thoughts like that, they crowd at you. And sometimes they're off in the background, like ringing in your ears, you know, and you have to exist your whole life with that gnawing away at you. And I think all of us have got a certain amount of that. So, you know, you have to engage in a kind of creative dialogue with it, where you're like, I know you are, but what am I? You know? You've said all that before, and it's never been true. You know, I still make things succeed, so shut up. You know, but it's still going to be there. You have to be realistic about it. You just can't let it have too much say. You can't let it be the defining, you know, opinion. You know, it is just a voice, and it's not your primary voice. Mm-hmm. It is a summation of all your insecurities and fears. And so, of course, it's going to be negative. And it's also very likely going to be unreasonable. It's very likely going to have a lot of exaggeration in its fears. It's going to have a lot of slippery slopes, you know. Well, if you do try this and it fails, then everybody will laugh at you and you'll lose all your friends and you'll be all alone and you'll have no point in this world. So don't try it, you know. That's a tough one. We got all these things going against us. I don't know how different it would have been a generation ago or 2 generations ago, you know. I think humans have always had these these fears and these insecurities. It's just different now that we have instant access to a whole world of fear and insecurity, you know, and we've got these monkey chatter transmitters in our pockets, and they are just filling our heads with doubt. On the other hand, you could be connecting with a positive community through it as well. So, you just have to be careful whether you're eating good food or junk food when you open that thing up.
Mm-hmm. Right. What do you expose yourself to?
Yeah.
No doubt. I mean, there is the whole idea of imposter syndrome and, intrusive thoughts and, that really, that can run, like you said, into a rut, run to a bad place. So being aware of it and, like you said, not always listening. You can't. You really,
okay, so right? let's hear your definition of imposter syndrome, your articulation of it.
Well, I guess it would be self-doubt, that you think you're not good enough, or you're basically not what you say you are to be, that, what you're presenting yourself as potentially. And
not truly qualified to be you.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Now,
it's a newer
phrase that I'm more familiar with.
Yeah.
And more recently.
Do you think it's a more recent phenomenon, or do you think that it's always been a little bit like that for people?
I think it's probably always been a little like that. I think you're right, though, exacerbated by, social media and what. But I think we were programmed and wired to have much different lives than the modern day life here. The way we evolved isn't supposed to be like this. And I don't think our brains or insides have caught up to that fact.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of primitive roots that we don't pay attention to and listen to. And I think whether that's like with spirituality or even how the diet, how active, and movement and like different tribal clans. I know even the tattoo as a, tribal calling card, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've lost a lot of that. And I think I don't know, but I know when I try to think about primitive roots and like, how can that help me? What are we missing here?
Yeah. It seems like we've just filled our minds up with so much clutter, So when you talk about our so-called primitive roots, you're probably talking about an era when we had a little bit more space in our minds to just exist and be ourselves, right? We weren't filling up every corner of our existence with input. It's like if you sit down to use the bathroom, like that's a minute and a half you're not going to waste. You're going to catch up on your feed, right? And because this stuff is all addictive, we just keep setting a new standard for how much flood of input that we're getting all the time. And so the idea that you're going to voluntarily have a reduced flow of input, like when I go to take a walk and I leave the phone in the house, right? My input is going to be the forest, and whatever happens to be going on in my brain.
And that's healing place. Like just doing that connection alone is sort of, that input of fresh air as well.
I think that's not available to a lot of people. If you are living in an apartment dwelling kind of existence where you're working a lot of hours, you've got to commute, kids that need to get to school, all that stuff. You got to plan that stuff. You actually have to like schedule it, and chances are it's going to get, and the kids will be sick or something. And you're lucky to be able to squeeze in one or two of those a month. And so we count ourselves lucky, that we've cut our own trails, that we step out the house and they're there. But of course we have to maintain them and everything. That's not. It's a big privilege to have that. But I think of it as a mental health must. Especially since we do live and work on the same piece of property, and we homeschool, and so definitely there has to be some places to go.
Yeah, go burn something off, go take a hike,
Yeah.
just be with nature, listen to the breeze, look up at the trees, just be grounded.
Yes. Remember what it feels like to just be you, without a device telling you something, filling you with something, some kind of want or some kind of need or some kind of insecurity, reminding you of something that you should be doing. Look, they're doing it. Why aren't you doing it? Look how much they got done on their front porch. They got their front porch finished. Look, that video shows them doing it in 30 seconds. How come yours is still unfinished? You got to put that stuff down every now and then and just be.
Yeah, there's all these platitudes that people say, but comparison as the thief of joy is a big one, and like like you said, their porches, they're done faster than it is, that really is a slippery slope.
Yeah, their circumstances are different from yours.
Absolutely.
And maybe they're editing. And it didn't take them 30 seconds to do it. Maybe they lost a finger in the process. You never know.
Right.
They're just going to show you the good parts. So that's one of the pitfalls, I guess, right now is the amount of input. We don't really have time to think it through or process it and say to ourselves, okay, well, if that were me living that lifestyle, what would I have to do after this photo shoot? Well, yeah, then I have to spend an hour and a half picking all that stuff up and then, before you know it, it's evening and the kids are cranky and you did all that just for an Instagram photo shoot. And, let's be realistic. Let's stop for a second and remember that, all these amazing photos of amazing, beautiful people having their incredible, joy-filled lives is a production. It is a confection. It's not real. Or if it is real, it's only part real.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, that's how particularly Instagram is.
Yes.
Particularly filtered, particularly highlight reel, glimpses of moments. And Instagram's particularly bad for that.
Yeah, and I think that it has a really poisonous effect on young people who think that that's real life somehow.
Gosh, there was some article that came out recently. It was I can't remember who it was, but I think it came out from the AP, and it was about social media and kids, and that this guy, I guess like 13, he's like, I don't think they should be on social media before they're 13. And I know all kids are now, on it in a big way, but I guess for some of these reasons that we're talking about here, because it's not reality. And now even the youth, with the distortion, talk about the distortion of reality that they're being bombarded with.
Somebody could be 12 years old and get deep into a discussion circle on, like that's pro eating disorder or fascist, or you know what I mean? They could be like 12 or 13 and going down those kinds of rabbit holes, and a lot of the time the parents are just happy that the kids sucked into their device so they can be sucked into their device.
Right.
It's this kind of...
Oh, they're quiet. They're sitting there. They're not, and I get that. I'm not a parent, so I can't know what that's like and how, what raising a kid is. But, they are our future, right? The youth. And so, we gotta support the youth, I guess.
Yeah. Well, if there's one thing, if I'm not really qualified to give parenting advice, okay, but I'll tell you something that went right for us is we got our daughter a nice iPad at one point, an iPad Pro, with an Apple Pencil. I managed to find one used in good condition, and the idea was, this is not for movies, this is not for games, this is not for social networking, this is for your creative apps. And as such, we're not putting a cap on it. Okay?
Sure.
We're not limiting your screen time on this. because, you know, we know parents that, you know, we try to limit their gaming to 12 hours a day. You know, it's like, in light of that, you know, if she wants to spend 3 hours writing her novel, that's not excessive screen time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
But
Which we gotta plug her novel, Kaya's novel.
Yeah.
She's incredibly talented.
Her first
and
novel,
gifted.
The Dark Ruby, is going to be published on Amazon sometime this spring. It's going through its final edits right now, and she's, you know, 200 pages into the sequel. So yeah, she's been really focused on that.
It's incredible from what I've heard, which was, I'm glad we got a sneak peek of that at our recent open mic night.
Yeah.
Kaya came and read some from the novel, and I was just blown away.
It's pretty intense stuff.
It was amazing, really.
Yeah.
Very talented young person.
That's the other
Young
thing
writer.
about being a young person right now is, on the one hand, there's all that BS we were just talking about, but there's also opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like she can actually publish a book. She doesn't have to wait and see if, you know, she doesn't have to pile up the rejection letters necessarily. So yeah, we've been reading this series, the Inheritance Cycle, Aragon, and these other books by this guy Christopher Paolini, and he was a homeschool kid, and his parents helped him publish his first book when he was 15, and then they took him around and did a bunch of reading events at libraries and schools, and eventually the book was discovered by a big publishing label, and he ended up on the New York Times bestselling list. But it started out with home publishing and a homeschool effort and supportive parents who were self-employed who could say, yeah, we're going to do some touring here. So I don't know if that's what we're going to do in the case of this book, but we're here for her if that's what she needs to do.
That's so cool, Guy.
And it's not to say that she's going to end up on the New York Times bestseller list, but it's going to give her a chance
But don't
to do these
she
kind
could.
of events.
Don't put the cap on her.
You don't tell a kid they can't do that.
No.
You know, if they're willing to make the effort, that's the thing. So, you know, a kid might say, yeah, I am going to be famous. And it's like, okay, we'll do it, you know. If they're then willing to go down there and write that 300 pages, you know, and then listen to all the suggestions about editing and do a great job with all of that in a humble and you know, well thought out way. You know, It's just like if somebody is willing to do all that effort, then those doors should be open for them.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of kids right now, they're just Minecraft all day. You know what I mean? And they want to be famous. You know, maybe they can be a famous Minecraft star or whatever. You know, and maybe they can be famous in the Minecraft circle.
Yeah.
It's just so prefabricated and fake, and she just doesn't like that. You know, and we didn't deliberately try raising her that way, but I mean, we don't like that stuff either, and so that's just how it turns out.
Just how it happens.
We like real things, you know.
There are more independent ways for artists, young artists these days, like Kaya, to get her book to self-publish, and then, you know, I mean, but to do the work you mentioned,
Right.
that is the foundation. Then
Yes.
can launch.
You don't.
right?
You can't build a career on nothing. You know, you need to actually deliver the goods. You need to be willing and actually happy to do the work. You know, and then the rest can follow from there once you've done that. So the other thing that she's going to be learning about as a kind of a homeschool thing is we're going to do a crowdfunding project for our the children's book I mentioned. Since we don't want to just publish that as a paperback on Amazon, we want to do a really nice print job like we've done for all of our art books that we've done so far on Proton Press. And so the last book that I published, the Biomech Encyclopedia, was a really big, heavy book, and it was going to cost a lot of money, and I didn't want to have to borrow to do it, and I didn't have it laying around. So that was my first experience crowdfunding. I did this through Kickstarter, and I was really surprised at the outpouring of support for the book, and about half of the supporters that came through Kickstarter were not our normal people, which was amazing. Half of them, a full half of them, were just Kickstarter people. Like, that looks like a cool book. Okay, I'll pre-order one.
Cool.
So, yeah. Now, for those not that familiar with crowdfunding, some people are like, "Oh, you want a handout?" No, that is not how Kickstarter works. We are pre-selling things, okay? And some of these things include, for the Biomech Encyclopedia, I ended up owing 74 paintings, original paintings, among other things that I had to send out to all the people who had sent me money for this. So, no, it is not a handout. The amount of work that I had to do to fulfill all these pledges would have been above and beyond if I had just simply booked all the tattoos and done them and just paid for the book that way. But the crowdfunding was a really great way to get the project on the radar and get a lot of support. I mean, having 450 copies ready to send out immediately as soon as the shipment arrived, that's what every publisher would want, So, yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm looking forward to doing a crowdfunding thing for Lizard Life with daughter, so she'll understand the crowdfunding process.
Cool.
And hopefully we'll get some support for this book, which is about a pair of eastern fence lizards battling Orcus the rat snake.
Yeah, that sounds exciting.
It's been fun. We've done a lot of really elaborate illustrations. It's got 49 illustrations in it that are very, like fully rendered, kind of, a lot of hours have gone into this thing. So I'm excited to finally put it out there, hopefully this year.
That'd be so cool. Well, I'll be looking out for that whole announcement and campaign, and hopefully maybe she could share another passage from it.
Yeah,
at the upcoming art event.
So Lizard Life,
open mic.
If we were to do an open mic thing with Lizard Life, we've actually talked about how we would do that. Because there's different characters, and we would probably have some fun, like voicing out the characters and having some of the pages of the book up on the big screen.
That'd be cool.
We're doing it.
Nice.
So we might do something like that. At some
Nice.
point.
Cool. That'd be fun.
Okay, so what else? All right, coming right up on March 4th, mostly little paintings at the Long Branch Cafe in Carbondale. Those will be hanging for a month or so, and you'll not be seeing a lot of my typical biomechanical stuff there. You'll be seeing sunset paintings and things like that, which, believe it or not, I've done scads and scads of those. And they would be nicely framed and presented and affordable. And let's see, what else?
How long does that show run for, Guy?
Long
Long Branch.
let's see if I got that closing date yet.
Great
March and
Vegetarian
April.
Cafe
it's
over
coming
in Carbondale.
Yes, it's coming down on May 1st, so it's going to stay up for 2 months.
Cool.
That's my work, Michelle's work, and Kaya's work. It's a beautiful selection of paintings that the two of them have done as well. They're all meant to be affordable, and it's a very different kind of thing from what we would normally do as artists, But because we've been doing this painting challenge twice a year, we've amassed a lot of these what artists call studies. It's not a painting in the sense of I'm taking on this project because I have a vision. It's more of, oh, the sky looks like we're going to have a nice sunset. I'm going to just see if I can capture it.
Yeah.
I'll keep trying, and maybe I'll get a little bit better at it each time.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it will somehow contribute to my overall ability to understand certain atmospheric conditions and colors and things like that. I mean, as an artist, the best thing you could do is just keep pushing forward.
Yeah, keep doing it, keep practicing, keep creating. Go with the flow.
Yeah.
Where that takes you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exciting, Guy. Well, I've enjoyed getting to talk to you.
Yeah. Great discussion. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Let's
Next
do
time
it.
I've got a major event, we'll get back into this and dive deeper into all these things.
That'd be great. If you were to give a young artist a piece of advice, one thing for them to do, what would you say to them?
Okay, if they are a tattoo artist, subscribe to Reinventing the Tattoo. And everything that I could possibly say about design is in there. Reinventingthetattoo.com. But in general, try to align yourself with more experienced artists if you can. If you're a tattoo artist or a wannabe tattoo artist, get tattooed by really good people if you can afford it. and see if you can ask questions or at least get some sense of the thought process and everything behind it. If you're lucky, they might even be willing to give you feedback on some of your drawings or something like that. If you have a couple people like that in your life that you can get regular feedback from who are more experienced than you, that will help to propel you along. It help you to gain momentum, help to open doors. I guess attached to that same thought is don't be shy. It's okay to fall flat on your face socially every now and then. It's okay to have awkward moments. It's not okay to hide. So get out there to the trade shows and conventions and art events. If you can muster the courage, try to introduce yourself to the people you admire. But talk to other people, who are in a similar boat as you, who are also fans, and develop long-standing friendships and alliances. It starts young. People I met in my first convention, I'm still friends with now. We've done incredible collaborations. We've done stuff that has moved us forward as artists. And you never know when somebody you meet might be part of a thread that be part of your life for your whole career. Community is really important. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. So don't be shy. Try to meet people. Try to mix. Put your stuff out there. Get feedback. Be humble. Give feedback. And always remember to have gratitude that you're part of the creative world, that you're an artist, that you have all those opportunities in front of you, that you have all those challenges in front of you. All of it is good, even the hard parts. Be grateful for it. And, good things will come. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but it's all true.
I think it's great advice. Words to live by, really. So thank you, Guy, for coming on the podcast, sharing your wisdom, your mastery with
Thank you, Luke.
Union Street. And hope to have you back on. Good luck with the show. Check it out, Long Branch. Can we say those days one more time, Guy? Okay. Where can people find you?
Long Branch Cafe in Carbondale. I don't have the address, but you can look it up if you've never been there before. It's by the train tracks. We have our opening ceremony on March 4th from 11 to 1, and it'll be hanging for 2 months. And there's a front room and a back room, so make sure you go all the way to the back to check out the whole collection, because we'll have a lot of stuff back there too.
Very cool. Well, exciting. It's been good to have you on. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching the Union Street Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. We have a new podcast we do every Friday. Be looking out for some upcoming events. Come to our open mic. Check us out. Follow us. All that jazz that you do out there on the internet. But yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next one.